وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق ونور عرش أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا وسيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد صلى على وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. My dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Exclusive Assalamu alaikum to Haji Vicky, I didn't see you. God bless you guys. We thank Allah for granting us this opportunity to gather on such a blessed Sunday as a means for you and I to build our relationships with one another and to fortify our community. And Islam is such a perfect way of life that within its stipulations of salat, siyam, hajj, etc., you find that Allah always promotes things on the communal level, at the level of the community. You and I, we can pray furada prayers, individual prayers, all we want, but you notice that jama'ah supersedes furada. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq says that when 10 people pray shoulder to shoulder, you cannot quantify the barakah of that prayer. You notice siyam, fasting. Allah doesn't just say, every single one of you fast for 30 days before the next lunar year. He says every single one of you fast, and you will fast together. And that's why it's actually extremely hard to make up a fast outside of the month of Ramadan than it is to just fast during the month of Ramadan with everybody else. When you look at Hajj, Hajj has been fashioned in a way where the masses go to the same central point at the same time. Irregardless of where you are, irregardless of what terrain you live in, you find that all 2 billion Muslims face the same direction in prayer, the Qibla. And if you were to take all of the land mass on earth and flatten it, you would find that the Kaaba is at the center of the earth. Mecca is at the center of the earth. And you and I as a community are moving towards one objective in life, and that is to have ma'rifah of Allah. For Allah has given you and I 2 faculties, the aql and the qalb, in order to know Allah. When the Quran says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created the human being and the jinn except to worship me, here لِيَعْبُدُونَ is meant to take you and I to لِيَعْرَفُونَ. Why? Because Allah in Surah Yasin says, وَانِعْبُدُونِ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ. Allah says, worship me, for it is the straight path. And someone who is fastidious would ask the follow-up question of, well, the straight path to what? Towards knowing Allah. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq says, لِيَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرَفُونَ. Ibadah is the vehicle that you and I use. Worship is the vehicle that you and I will continuously use, so that our ma'rifah of Allah continues. Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha says, أَوَّلُ دِينَ مَعْرِفَتُهُ. He says the crux of deen, and here deen, by the way, is a way of life. You see, religion is not something I just put in my closet or I put in a drawer and then I take it out on Fridays for Salatul Jum'ah, or I take it out and I go to the church on Sunday. Deen is a way of life. And every single person has a religion. Even the one that rejects God rejects Him religiously. So deen is a way of life, and Imam is saying, أَوَّلُ دِينَ مَعْرِفَتُهُ. The beginning of deen is to know Allah. And I tell you this, quite frankly, every station that you and I live in, whether it's this dunya, whether it's our transition into barzakh, or finally Yawm al-Qiyamah, our understanding of Allah continues. You see, you and I, we recite in our prayers every day, Allah is Malik Yawm al-Din. Allah is the master of the Day of Judgment. Lillahi mulku samawati wal ard. Allah says, I am the master of the heavens and the universe. Ya ayyuhan nas, antumul fuqara ila Allah, wallahu wal ghaniyul hamid. Allah says every single one of you are faqir. Every single one of you are impoverished. Now you and I, we understand this. On an introductory level, we get it. Allah is the master, He owns the universe, our maintenance is dependent on it. We get it on a very introductory level. But when will we finally understand it? When you and I are on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and the things that we thought that we owned, the hands that we thought belonged to us, the feet that we thought belonged to us, the tongue that we thought that we owned, begin to testify against us. And you and I have no control over it. That's when you and I will understand what it means when we say Malik Yawmiddin. What's our objective in life? Our objective is to get to that ma'rifah before we get there. Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein, same thing. Amir al-Mu'mineen's philosophy was so pervasive that it came down to Imam al-Hussein, who said something so powerful. He says, مَا خَلَقَ الْعِبَادِ إِلَّا لِيَعْرَفُوهُ. I tell you, if we didn't have any narration from Imam al-Hussein except for this one, it would have been sufficient. For he says, Allah did not create His servants except to know Him. What's Karbala? It's an expose of ma'rifah of Allah. If you don't have ma'rifah of Allah, you cannot bear to see your children getting massacred in front of you. If you don't have ma'rifah of Allah, you wouldn't accept shahada and martyrdom for yourself. When the Quran mentions the muhajir, you see hijrah, many of you may have done hijrah or your parents have done hijrah. They migrated from one land to another. And when we look at the Quran, we look at Allah mentions the muhajirin. And people translate muhajirin as just somebody who, like I said, packs their bags up and they move from one land to another. In fact, those who came after Rasulullah and usurped the leadership illegally, they came and they used muhajirin as a point of contention. Look, you know, we're muhajir, we packed up our bags, we accompanied the Holy Prophet, we went from Mecca to Medina, thus we have extraordinary rights over you. We have a greater right to Baytul Mal than you do because we're muhajir. In Saqifa, they did the same thing. They said, you know, you are Ansar, we are muhajirin, you know, we suffered a little bit more, we packed our stuff, we left our families, therefore we deserve to rule over you. But what they didn't understand is muhajir in the Quran is translated differently. Allah says the muhajir is muhajiran in Allah wa Rasulih. A muhajir is somebody who is migrating towards Allah and His messenger. You look at the geopolitics of the world today, you look at the Middle East, what's been taking place in Gaza, for example. These things have been happening for decades. And people think that the war in the Middle East or the genocide in the Middle East is just a war of resources. You know, one Anglo-American empire is going and they're trying to steal oil, or they're trying to steal opium, or they're trying to accumulate land. No, no. These are secondary, tertiary matters. The primary war is a war of ideas. The geopolitics of the world is governed by ideas. You see? It's governed by eschatology. Eschatology meaning the idea of the end times. Here you have two different groups of people who think they have ma'rifah of God. This is the point. One is a Christian Zionist group and the other is a Jewish Zionist group. And these two have such a cynical relationship with one another that they think that by causing war and destruction and carnage in the region, you can now force God to come back. One of them thinks that God is Jesus who's going to come back. The other one thinks that the Messiah is going to come back. For when the Messiah sees that our back is against the wall, then He's going to come and aid His chosen people. You see? Not understanding that you can't achieve virtue through vice. The ends do not justify the means. But because there's a lack of understanding of God, we create God in our own image and we say we are the chosen people. Allah says, do you know who the chosen people are? قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ هَادُوا إِنْ زَعَمْتُمْ أَنَّكُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ لِلَّهِ مِنْ دُونِ النَّاسِ فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. Allah says the chosen people are those who do فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. They seek death. In other words, they seek Allah. And Allah is so merciful that He's created such a beautiful system around you and I that makes it conspicuously clear that there is a creator. When we say Allah is Hakim, it means that His system is kamil, it's complete, and you and I have the potential to move towards perfection. I'll give you an example. It's like when you go to the car dealership and you buy a car. You turn the car on and you notice that there isn't any gas. The car is complete, but it's not perfect. But it has the potential for perfection. Why? You could just take it to the gas station, fill it up, and now the world is your oyster. You go up, left, down, right, it doesn't matter. The car is complete and now it's perfect. But if you go to the car dealership and you buy a car without a gas tank, now not only is the car incomplete, but it can never be perfect. Why? Because no matter how much gas you pour in it, it leaks from the bottom. Allah says you are a complete human being and you have the potential to move towards perfection if you decide to do so. You look at diseases, viruses. Believe me, if you and I followed the prescription of Allah, we wouldn't have pandemics, we wouldn't have endemics. But because they're a group of people who want to cash in and make some money, we come and we meddle with nature. But even diseases, sicknesses, Allah says it's a rahmah. For the human being is constantly refining his genes and his genome to withstand more sickness, to withstand more disease. People think that evolution is a theory that comes and replaces God, not realizing that evolution is based on a simple principle of survival of the fittest. Why? Why is it survival of the fittest? Why not survival of the weakest? Don't the weak need less resources to survive? Allah says, you see this evolution, it's a progressive system. It's not regressing, it's not devolving, it's evolving. Allah says, who do you think put that there? You look at nature, the sun gives its light to the grass is consumed by the insect is consumed by the frog is consumed by the snake to prevent the extinction of the insect. Allah says it's a modular system. Don't you see? You look at a crocodile, this cold-blooded reptile that'll snatch your legs off. This crocodile every single day opens up its jaw and allows for birds to enter inside and eat the food in between its teeth. Why? So that the croc's teeth are clean and the bird's stomach is full. Allah says, do you see these two? They look different. They act differently. They behave differently. They move differently. But something about the way that they work together brings you back to the same Khaliq, brings you back to the same Creator. No man-made creation, my brothers and sisters, work that way. If I come and put a brand new iPhone in front of you, next to an off-brand iPhone, automatically you'd know this iPhone came from Apple and the other iPhone came from somebody's basement in Dearborn. Immediately you would know. You unlock both phones and you go through it, you say 100%, one of these phones, it works fast, it's quick, the other phone is glitchy, it's slow. Guaranteed, because they work differently, because they act differently, these two came from different places, different sources. Allah says, my creation, no matter how diverse it is, it brings you back to me. قَالَ رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَ ثُمَّ حَدَى. Allah says, I created everything and then I guided it. Amir al-Mu'mineen speaks about the wind and the mountains. Why? Why does Imam speak about the wind and the mountains? Imam says, pay attention to this wind, this thing that you and I take for granted, that regulates the temperature and it passes pollination so that flowers can bloom and your food can grow. And it works in conjunction with mountains. These mountains that anchor the ground so that you and I can walk normally. Imam says, look at this, the wind and the mountain work together and bring forth 4 different seasons. And each season brings different fruits. Spring has its fruits, summer has its fruits, the fall has its fruits. Imam says, which other planet allows for these 2 things to come together and gives you the opportunity to move and breathe so effortlessly? Which other planet? Look at the rahmah of Allah that you and I were not born on Mars. We weren't born on the moon. Allah places you and I here. And Allah says, pay attention. Look, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Allah says, the ulil albab. What's ulil albab? Lub in Arabic means the kernel, nucleus. Ulil albab are those who look deeply and they look at creation all around them, standing, sitting, lying on their side, and they come to one conclusion, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. Oh Allah, you didn't create any of this in vain. Subhanaka faqina adhabana. Glory be to you, O Allah. Allah asks you and I a very direct question in the Quran. He says, Afallahi shak. He says, do you doubt my existence? Interestingly, the Quran only establishes the existence of God with a handful of verses. Majority of the verses about God in the Quran is addressing the polytheist, the one who puts partners to God. Why? It's because Allah says the very question of my existence is proof positive that I'm there. For the human being does not debate the existence of unicorns as much as it does debate the existence of Allah. And Allah says there's something implanted within the ethos of the human being that begs them to ask the question of the existence of God, which shows you that there is something there. But you and I have become so clever. The human being is so clever that it says to Allah, oh God, show me that you exist. Just like the Bani Israel, when they told Musa, oh Musa, tell this God of yours to manifest himself in front of us. And Allah looks at you and me and He says, how about you prove to yourself how you exist? Where did you come from? How did you come from nothing into something? And how will you go from something into nothing, and from nothing into something again? وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُمْ مِنْ بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. Allah says, it is me who delivered you from the womb of your mother. You thought it was the doctor who delivered you. The doctor is a conduit, for Allah says, I brought you into this world and you knew nothing, and I gave you hearing, and I gave you sight, and I gave you understanding. You know, I remember in the mosque we have a lot of youth programs. And one of the brothers who's usually jumping off the walls and energetic and rambunctious, as we like to say in English, one of the days he comes for the youth program and he's a bit down, he's a bit depressed. I said, brother, what's wrong with you? You know, everything okay? He says, you know, I'm fine. I said, no, something's wrong with you. He says, you know, Mahdi, one day I was walking inside my home and I overheard my mom. She was on the phone with my aunt. And my mom told my aunt that my birth wasn't planned for. My birth was an accident. And I said, you know, these little children, they're like sponges. You know, they're lingering behind the walls, they're lingering behind the doors, and they're just eating what you're saying and you don't even know it. I said, brother, there are no such thing as accidents in life. There are no such things as coincidences in life. There are things that I'll go through in life that you'll never go through. And there are things that you'll endure that I'll never endure. If any one of you showed up to this masjid 10 minutes before the time that you did, you would have had a different encounter. You would have had a different conversation. You would have bumped into somebody different. If you leave this masjid 10 minutes after the time that you usually do, maybe you'll bump into traffic, causing you to reroute your way home. Allah says in every single one of these instances, I showed you something. قُلْ هُوَ الَّذِي أَنْشَأَكُمْ وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ قَلِيلًا مَا تَشْكُرُونَ. Allah says, I gave you hearing, I gave you sight, and I gave you understanding that you can process things around you. Look, if you're having a conversation with the person sitting next to you, as you're talking to them, if that person raises one eyebrow, you back off. You say, maybe I said something controversial. Maybe I said something problematic. If they take this one eyebrow and they bring it down as you're talking to them, you say, oh, you know what? We're on the same page. I didn't say anything too troubling. How? From one eyebrow? Now the tricky thing is those who don't have eyebrows. But then Allah says, look at the eyes. Are the eyes dry? Are the eyes watery? Look, you and I, the conscious mind can rapidly process things on a second-by-second basis. No AI technology can process information as quickly as the human mind. This consciousness that scientists look at this brain. You know, this brain is a physical organ that you and I can scan. They look at this brain and they say, how does the mind emerge from this? How does consciousness emerge from this? What is consciousness? It's what you and I call the ruh. Just as a side note, and I'll conclude shortly. The ruh is something so powerful. You notice when Allah created Adam, He describes to the malakut in Iblis, who is a jinn amongst the angels, exactly what He's going to create Adam from. He says this Adam is going to be made from teen, from mud, and at the same time, I'm going to implant within him the ruh. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Interestingly, when Allah asks Iblis, why didn't you prostrate to Adam? He says, أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ, I am greater than him. And he gives his reasoning. And this is what's so interesting. Iblis says, I'm made of fire and he's made of dirt. You say, hold on, wait a minute, Iblis. Allah says Adam is made of dirt and the ruh. Why did you conveniently leave out the ruh? Why did you just say Adam is made of mud? It's because he understood the authority of the ruh. What is this soul? When you look at the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, and this takes a little bit of patience, the ruh is made up of two components, for lack of better terms. One is the aql, and the other is the qalb. And the aql and the qalb have two different capacities. The aql is very one-dimensional, and it has the power of imagination, tasawwur, you can imagine things. And the aql, for the most part, understands things after having experienced things through your senses. If I come now and I tell you, picture for me the sky, even without looking at the sky, your aql, your mind, can picture it. You know, sky is blue, sometimes it's dark, sometimes it has stars, sometimes there's clouds and it's fluffy. You notice your aql understands it by reducing it to a color, to a shape, to a size, to a form. You tell your aql, picture for me grass. You say grass is green. Sometimes it's yellow, if it's in front of my house. It's oval. You know, it has a certain texture to it. Automatically your aql, grass, color green, shape oval, texture. Your mind understands things by reducing it to a color, to a shape, to a size, to a form. You ask your aql, does gravity exist? Your brain looks around and says, 100% gravity exists. Everybody's grounded, nobody's floating. You say, bravo, gravity exists. But aql, can you tell me, what is gravity made of? Your aql says, what do you mean, what is gravity made of? You ask your aql, does God exist? You say 100%, based on this conversation that we've had for the last 15 minutes, guaranteed God exists. You say, aql, is Allah all good? Guaranteed He's all good. Is He just? 100% He's just. For the definition of Allah is someone who demands my worship and demands my obedience, and thus such an entity is all good, is just. You say, okay, Allah is just, God is just. Can you describe to me, aql, what is the justice of Allah? What does that mean? You say Allah is qadir, Allah is powerful. Well, what does that mean? You say Allah is alim, He has ilm. What does that mean? I can't tell you. But the qalb works in a different way. The qalb can understand things without having to reduce it to a color, to a shape, to a size, to a form. Your qalb has love. You love your children. You love your spouse. You love your parents. You say, qalb, you have this love. Does it exist? Qalb says, this love is as apparent to me as my nose. I know it exists. And I have an understanding in a way that I can't describe to you in words. You say, okay, qalb, you say love exists. Can you tell me what color is this love? Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? How much does this love weigh? How many pounds? How many kilograms? Qalb says, it doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a weight. And it doesn't need to have those things for me to understand it. Your qalb feels hunger. You say, qalb, you feel hungry. You say, 100% I feel hunger. You say, what color is the hunger? How tall is your hunger? How wide is your hunger? Qalb says, I don't need to describe to you what color it is, what shape it is, what size is it. It doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have a size. Allah says, exactly, because you cannot limit me, because you can't reduce me to a color, to a shape, to a size, to a form, the only thing that can fathom me is your qalb. Ala bidhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. Allah says your qalb is the only thing that can comprehend me. Al-Iman ma'rifatu fil qalb. Imam says Iman is in qalb. Every time Iman is mentioned in the Quran, the qalb is mentioned subsequently. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلتكم من أعمالكم شيئا. Allah says the desert dwellers, they come and they say to you, O Prophet, that we believe. Allah says, tell them they have not believed, for Iman has not entered their heart yet. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. O Allah, allow our hearts not to go astray after you have guided it. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Allah says the believers are those that when you mention Allah, their qalb moves, their qalb races. And when you give them the signs of Allah, the ayat of Allah, their iman increases. When iman enters the qalb, it leads to amalus salih. If belief does not lead to measurable action, is it really belief? You look at Iblis. Many people can come and say that this Iblis is a bigger muwahhid than many people. Do you know why? Because Iblis has a conversation with Allah. Allah speaks directly to Iblis. Allah has never spoken to you and I directly before in our life. Do you think Iblis doubts the existence of God? Iblis believes in Allah. Not only does Iblis believe in Allah, he believes in Yawm al-Qiyamah. He asks Allah, oh Allah, grant me respite until that day. Meaning this Iblis believes in Allah, he believes in Yawm al-Qiyamah. Not only does he believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah, I take it a step further. He believes in the infallibility and the purity of his leaders. Do you know why? He says, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأَغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Not mukhlisin. See, mukhlisin are people like me. You know, someday you feel spiritual, some days you don't. Someday you're doing wajibat and you're doing mustahabbat. Someday you're barely holding on to wajibat. That's mukhlisin, up and down like an EKG. But Allah says mukhlasin. Iblis says, I'm going to fool them all. I will trick them all, except for those who are mukhlas, meaning those who are intrinsically pure. Here, this Iblis believes in Allah, believes in Yawm al-Qiyamah, believes in the representatives of Allah, yet Allah says, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. He says, this Iblis is a kafir. How? You know, people look at Iblis and they say, 6,000 years Iblis worshipped for Allah. Amir al-Mu'mineen in Najr, he says 6,000 years Iblis worshipped Allah. And you and I don't know, is that 6,000 earthly years or is that 6,000 years in the next domain, in which each day is equivalent to 50,000? Yet with one slip, with one disobedience, this Iblis, failing to prostrate, is expelled by Allah. How? Isn't that a bit harsh? You and I slip every day, yet Allah says, I'm Sattarul Uyub. I cover your mistakes. You and I are lucky to worship Allah for 50, 60 years, and He conceals our mistakes. Yet Iblis, 6,000 years, expelled from one disobedience. How? Is that fair? Allah says, yeah. Iblis was worshiping for 6,000 years, but he wasn't worshiping me. He was worshiping himself. And with one act of disobedience, how he felt on the inside manifested on the outside. Oh Allah, you took away my children. You took away my spouse. You took away my parents. And because you took them away from me, I will stop praying to you. I'll stop fasting. Allah says, then you weren't worshiping me. You were worshiping your children. You were worshiping your spouse. And you were worshiping your car and your business. You look at Shimr bin al-Jawshan. Shimr bin al-Jawshan was on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the battle of Siffin against Muawiyah. If Shimr received one arrow in his chest on the day of Siffin, you and I would call him a shaheed today. But Allah says, no, that's not how the system works. I'm going to keep you until what you truly believe in comes out. I'm going to hold you so that the things that you testify truly to will become manifested in front of you. And Allah says this, if you use your aql to accept my deen, for Allah says, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْحَانَكُمْ. Allah says, bring your evidence. Why do you believe in the things that you believe in? For you and I have been chosen and gifted and blessed that you and I have been born as Muslims. And not even that, an extra layer of mercy that you and I are born as followers of Ahlul Bayt. Allah says, despite you being born into this, despite it being a blessing, bring your evidence as to why you believe in what you believe in. And Allah says, if you use this aql to accept my deen, and you use your qalb to accept me, you will reach one station. You see, every single movement, every single religion, they say, if you follow me, we'll give you X, Y, and Z. If you subscribe to my YouTube, if you follow my Instagram, I'll give you the secrets of how to trade stocks. I'll teach you how to trade Bitcoin. You see? Every single person, you follow me, I'll give you this. And the question is this: when you and I use our aql and our qalb in conjunction for Allah, what does Allah give you and me? Allah says, if you do so, you will reach la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. If you use your intellect and your heart for me, you will reach a station where you don't fear, nor do you grieve. Just like Imam al-Hussein. You see, Imam on the night of Tasu'ah, he's in front of his tent and he's sleeping. Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam comes to him and says, you know, I hear the horses, they're coming. And Imam very gently wakes up and he looks at his brother Abul Fadl Abbas. He says, go and see what it is that they want. How? How is Imam in such a state that he's sleeping before the night, that he knows exactly what's going to take place? Allah says, awliya of Allah, la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. They don't fear, they don't grieve. You look at Nabi Ibrahim. This Nabi Ibrahim, one day, when the people were away, he goes into the room where all the idols were. And he comes and he takes an axe and he destroys every single idol in the room except for the biggest one. Before breaking the biggest one, he thinks to himself, you know what, let me leave this here and let me put the axe next to the hand of the biggest idol in the room. Later, when people came and they seen all their little idols destroyed and the big one is at the end of the hall, they're investigating, saying, who destroyed all these idols? Ibrahim, who's a teenager, is in the corner of the room in the back. And he's looking at all these people discussing and trying to get to the bottom of this. And he looks at him and he makes a suggestion. This Ibrahim is a teenager, Nabi Ibrahim. He says, you people are trying to figure out who destroyed all these little idols. They said, yeah. He said, what if that big idol destroyed all the little ones? They said, what do you mean? He says, look, the axe is next to the hand of the biggest idol. What if he picked it up and he destroyed all the little ones? They said, oh Ibrahim, that idol can't move. Ibrahim says, if the idol can't move, how did it create you? If the idol can't move, how does it sustain you? Aql. Later, when they find out that it was this Ibrahim who destroyed all the idols, they come and they grab this Ibrahim and they're about to launch him into the pits of a fire. At that moment, Allah sends down angel after angel. The angel that can control the wind comes and says, oh Ibrahim, Allah has sent me to ask you if there's anything that you'd like for me to do to help your situation. Ibrahim says, go back. Angel after angel came down. Ibrahim says, go back. Finally, Allah sends Jibreel. Jibreel comes down and he says, oh Ibrahim, Allah has sent me to ask you if there's anything that you'd like for me to do for you. Ibrahim says, go back, for Allah knows my situation. نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. It was at that moment that Allah says, بَرْدًا وَالسَّلَامَ عَلَى Ibrahim. Why? Because he accepted Allah with his qalb. You look at Rasulullah. When Rasulullah did his mi'raj towards the heavens, Jibreel is giving him the grand tour. They're going through every single level. He's praying with the prophets. He's meeting the prophets. Finally, Rasulullah gets to a certain point where Jibreel is no longer accompanying him. And he looks back and he notices Jibreel is behind him. Rasulullah says, oh Jibreel, you know, you've accompanied me throughout this entire journey. Why did you stop? Jibreel says, you're entering a domain where no other person has entered before you. Sidratul Muntaha, the outermost boundary of the mercy of Allah. You're going somewhere that nobody else had the privilege of going to. And now Allah is describing the reaction of the messenger. When Rasulullah is in this area, Allah says, this messenger, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. This messenger is in a place that nobody else has been in, yet Allah says he didn't look around. He wasn't dazzled. You see, when you and I, when we go to the Four Seasons 5-star resort, as soon as we scan our magnetic card and we open the door, we're jumping all over the place. You know, we're recording. We have our Instagram, we have our Snapchat, we're recording everybody. We're hanging off the chandelier. we're opening up the, gazebo area, and everybody has to see this. But Rasulullah is here, and Allah says, he wasn't stunned. It was as if he was there. How? How did they have that? They came and they asked Rasulullah, "Oh Rasulullah, have you seen heaven? Have you seen hell?" He says, "I'm seeing it right now. As you're speaking to me, I see paradise. I see the hellfire. It's right behind you." How? How do they have that? It's because they've seen it with their qalb. When they came to Amir al-Mu'mineen, they said, "Oh Ali, have you seen Allah?" He says, "I see nothing but Allah. ما رأيت إلا ورأيت الله قبله ومعه وبعده." I see nothing but that I see Allah with it, before it, after it. And this idea was so pervasive that it trickled down to his daughter Zainab alayhi salam, that when she enters that court and she's asked, "How do you view the way that we killed your refractory brother?" She says, "ما رأيته إلا جميلة ورحمة." I saw nothing but beauty. Some narrations say, "I saw nothing but beauty and the mercy of Allah." How? It's because they accepted Allah with their qalb. And you can't stun that. That Yazid comes and says, "Look what I've done." She says, "Your name will die, and the garden of my brother Hussein will remain green forever." And look, how true is that? That while Yazid and Muawiyah are buried on unmarked graves, Imam al-Hussein is walking like a king on earth today. How? How did they know that? How did they have that conviction? Because they had iman in their qalb. How do you and I get to that point? Is it possible? Allah says, if you want to. Your qalb has the power to see. It's just like a mother, and I'll conclude with this. A mother who's living here in Dearborn, if her child is out in the university, if her child is in California, Australia, wherever that child is in the world, if her child is under distress, that mother wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and she feels something. What is that? Did her aql tell her something? Did she read something? How'd she get that feeling? Allah says, you call that intuition. It's the qalb. And the qalb has the power to see, to feel. And Imam says, if you want the qalb, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, if you want the qalb to see more, do one thing. تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. Adopt the moral qualities of Allah. Meaning, if I want to understand what it means when we say Allah is Kareem, I need to be Kareem. If I want to understand what it means when we say Allah is Rahman or Allah is Rahim or Allah is Sattarul Uyub, then I need to be merciful. I need to conceal people's faults. That's the only way. You notice, when somebody's a generous person in the community, when they're very philanthropic, when they're very generous and they're pure, and we have many people in our community this way, they give. When this person sees somebody else giving, they think to themselves, wow, how pure is that person? They're also giving for the cause. Notice, because I'm a selfless person, I view others selflessly. But if a selfish person comes and sees a selfless person, and they see that this person is giving, the first thing that they think is, maybe this person is giving something because there's something to gain from it. They give with strings attached. There's a return. Why? Because when I'm a selfish person, I only give because there's a return on my giving. Thus, because of that, I view people's selflessness through the framework of my selfishness. Allah says, if you want to understand my generosity, you have to be generous with the people around you. If you want to understand my mercy, you have to be merciful to those around you. It doesn't work any other way. You see? When we look at people getting bombed and children are orphaned and they're ripped away from their families or they're killed in front of their parents, you and I look at this and we say, where is God? People come and say, where is God? How come He didn't show His mercy? It's because you don't understand mercy. You are not merciful to those around you, that you don't understand that Allah is saying, what I will give these children is something that they will never have been able to attain had they lived on this earth for 1,000 years. That they were starving on earth, I will feed them. That they were thirsty on earth, I will quench their thirst, and they will come to me. Had they lived here for 100 years, 1,000 years, they would have never attained the maqam and the station that I will give them. If only you understood. If only you got it. You know what it's like? It's like two different people coming in front of the sun. One person comes out of a hot sauna. He's steaming, he's sweating, and he has 10 pounds of clothes on. He comes out of the sauna and he's put in front of a blazing sun. He says, man, this sun is so blazing. Man, this sun is not a blessing. I can't believe it. I'm already burning up. This sun is here getting in my way. This is one scenario. Then there's somebody who just came out of the Antarctic. He's freezing. He's cold. And he comes in front of the sun. He says, wow, the sun is such a blessing that I've been freezing my whole life. And the sun is bringing warmth to me. Allah says it's a matter of perspective. How are you viewing the mercy and the blessings that I'm giving you? And we ask Allah to purify our hearts and to purify our qalb so that you and I can be upright, caring, sharing, and forgiving with one another. Let us end with a dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. May Allah bless all of you. Thank you. And inshallah we continue these programs moving forward. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.